Well, all right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you happen to be located. And welcome to the FAA's live event, where we're going to be talking about the operations over people rule for drones that just was in effect. So I'd like to welcome, we're broadcasting on our social media channels. You can find us on our Facebook, Twitter, and also YouTube channels. And you can also submit questions at any time during our event today through the Google form. We'll be posting the link to that Google form where you can submit your questions. It'll go to our production crew and then work its way to myself and Danielle for us to answer later today. This event is being recorded. It's being live streamed to our YouTube channel, and it should be available almost immediately following our event here today. So let's get to some introductions. My name is Kevin Morris, also known as the FAA Drone Guy. Many of you may have seen me before. I might even have met some of you before, but I'm really happy to be back in this virtual environment today talking about drones. I've been with the FAA for about 14 years, the past 6 or 7 years dedicated to drones, drone integration, and furthering drone operations in the United States. And I'm fortunate enough today to be joined by Danielle Corbett. And Danielle is with our FAA UAS integration office. And Danielle, I'll let you kind of tell them more about yourself.
Thanks, Kevin. It's such an honor to be here with the Drone Guy. I've been with the FAA for about 5 years. I haven't earned my shirt yet, it seems like. I have a little uniform there. But yeah, I've been with the integration office here for about 5 years. I've done a lot of different stuff in the office. I've been part of rulemaking teams and policy and all that stuff. But right now, I am running the support and outreach team, which includes the support center, which hopefully you guys are aware of. And if not, we'll talk about it more today. But we do have a group of people. Our entire team is here to serve you guys. We're here to answer questions and try to make heads and tails of what can seem like a little bit overwhelming rules and guidelines. We're really excited about the new rule. And hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions for you today. Real quick, prior to the FAA, I was a pilot. I flew business jets for a fractional airline, and I also have a drone. So I was just out there yesterday flying with my son. He's 5, and he was kind of showing me up a little bit, I have to say. And I'm actually taking some Girl Scouts out later today to do some drone photography. So hopefully I'm in your shoes and can see it from all sides, and hopefully answer some questions today.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Danielle. We are really lucky to have you today for this event, not only for all the work that you're doing, where you just mentioned about introducing drones to younger children and Girl Scouts, but the fact that you're sort of leading that UAS support center team. And we've really done well with that. That's been, I think, one of the highlights of our drone integration over the last couple of years, is sort of how that support center has grown. And we'll have a little bit more information on that later here. But if you haven't had a chance to use the support center, it is a great resource for anyone to use. And again, more information on that later. So, but let's get to what we're really here to talk about, which is the new operations over people rule. And before I dive into our topics here, I probably should clarify a little bit about the name. While certainly there are provisions now that will allow people to operate their drones over people, the title of the rule, operations over people, doesn't necessarily capture all the really cool stuff that we updated in Part 107. We're talking about remote pilot certification and currency. I think we're going to talk about that here just right off the bat, but I think that's one of the things that people have resoundingly been happy about, is the currency program we have. It also includes operating at night. When prior to this rule becoming effective, of course, we had to do waivers to operate at night. And by far, no question asked, the most popular waiver we received was to 107.29, which was the daylight rule, that people wanted to fly at night. Now that's baked into the rule. So that's really neat. And of course, operating over people, hence the title. We'll talk about that as well. But before we get into our first topic, a little bit of background on why we did this. Why did we update the rule? And people watching are probably asking, what took you so long to update the rule? But in reality, the FAA, in terms of a government organization with regards to UAS, is moving at a very rapid pace. It's very flexible, adaptable. And because of that, we've been able to get major rule changes in record time. So the technology in UAS drones have changed. The operational success record of drones have provided us more information and data on what we can do. I think this change provides a lot of flexibility for drone operators, a lot of mission flexibility is now just part of the rule. It's you can just do this without going through the waiver process. So again, this rule allows for operating over people, operating over moving vehicles, not without some caveats, of course, and certainly operating at night. But let's get into some of these new updates to the rule. So Danielle, I'm going to throw this your way first. Let's talk about remote pilot certification. What has changed with these updates?
So I think this is one of the best parts of the rule that's often overlooked because of its unfortunate name. But so remote pilot certification has become a little bit easier to remain current, is what we say. So for those of you who do have your Part 107 certificate, you've got the plastic card, you went to a knowledge testing center, you took a test, and the previous rule required you to keep it current every 24 months. That's still required. You have to have a recurrent training every 24 months. The new rule allows you to complete that training for free online at the comfort of your own home. So this is a big, big deal. You no longer have to go to travel anywhere or pay a fee. It's all right there on the FAA safety.gov website, so that you can remain current every 24 months. In addition to it renewing your currency, the other part of this recurrent training that's new is that it brings in the night training requirements that are required by the rule. So if you'd like to fly at night in accordance with the rule right now, you may, but one of the requirements is that you take that recurrent training. Very important that we make that distinction. So that's really exciting. And then the rule also clarified that you have to have it with you. That wasn't explicit in the old rule. So now, just like you carry your driver's license around, you get pulled over, you got to show it. You do also have to carry around the actual Part 107 plastic card certificate with you, in addition to an identification.
Yep, absolutely. And I think with those online training courses that are available, I think it's important to let people know that when they get to FAAsafety.gov, they're going to find 3 courses on there. So it's important that you make sure you're taking the right one, because 2 of those courses are designed and really only applicable to people who hold a Part 61 pilot certificate as well. But there is one course on there. It's the course number is ALC-677. And that's the course that anybody who currently holds a remote pilot certificate may take. And then just to touch a little bit more on one of the requirements, I wanted to get into, I've seen online some confusion about when you have that certificate with you now, which is, as Danielle pointed out, required when you're flying. Do you have to present it? Do you have to have it available? Can you take a photocopy of it? And Danielle's right. You have to have the actual certificate with you now. And when asked, you must present that certificate. Now, there's a lot of other documents required under Part 107. Maybe your waiver, perhaps a printout of your most recent knowledge test for currency purposes that you have to have as part of documentation. You don't necessarily need to carry that with you, although I recommend keeping it as part of your drone mission portfolio. But those documents need to be made available upon request. So, for example, your current test that you just finished, you don't necessarily have to carry it with you, but if the FAA were to ask for it, within a reasonable period of time, you must provide that to the FAA upon request. So there is a little bit of difference between having the certificate and presenting it, and then having other documents that need to be made available. And one more thing I'll say is, remember, if you have a waiver and the waiver requires you to carry that with you, you need to carry that with you. That's something that's in the waiver conditions and limitations. So that's really cool. And I think, Danielle, you're right. A lot of people are excited about that. So let's jump right into the very next thing that I think people are really excited about: flying at night. So I have a drone. Part 107 says I can fly at night. What do I need to do before I just go launch at midnight tonight?
Very exciting. This is one of the most immediate the things that you can do with the effectivity of the new rule, which happened last week. So flying at night. What's night? It's after sunset, right? And before sunrise, it's dark. Before you had to have a waiver, like you said. Now you can fly at night, but you have to do 3 things first. You have to have taken the recurrent training or the initial test at the Knowledge Testing Center that we just talked about. After April 6th is when the content was updated to include the night portion of the training and testing. All right. You have to have an airspace authorization, of course. If you're in controlled airspace, there's no change there, whether you're day or night. If you're in controlled airspace, you have to have an airspace authorization. And then you also, according to the rule, have to have certain kind of lighting on your drone itself. And that is a anti-collision light that is visible for 3 miles. So once you hit those 3 things, you're ready to fly at night.
Great. And what about airspace authorizations? Is that something that people need to remember? Like, for example, in the daytime, I go use Lance to go fly in controlled airspace. How does that work now for night?
That's a great question with a slightly complicated answer. So hopefully you guys are familiar with Lance, which is an acronym. It is the Low Altitude Authorization Notification Capability. We just call it Lance, all right? Lance, you probably know, is an application that you can use to get a near real-time airspace authorization in controlled airspace. We're going to kind of layer this on here for a second. Hopefully, if you're a Part 107 pilot now, you know that there's these things called UAS FMs. UAS, oh my God, Kevin, it's escaping. What does that stand for?
Facility maps.
Facility maps, the facility maps. Of course, it's the facility maps. So if you go onto our website, or a lot of the Lance providers will show you around an airport, there's like a grid, and in the grid are these values, and these are the pre-approved airspace altitudes that you can get in that area. So if you use Lance during the day, you could be standing somewhere and say, hey, I need an airspace authorization right now. Apply for something below that value, and you'll get it in near real time. For night, it's slightly more complicated, and Lance is available. It just means you have to plan a little bit more ahead, all right? So a couple things. Number one is that for flying at night to use Lance, you have to have 2 authorizations. One for daytime for the same calendar day, and one is this national authorization that the FAA issued that extends a daytime authorization to the night. Does that make sense? You need an example?
No, I think that's a pretty good example. So,
okay.
So what you're saying is that if I want to fly tonight, if I have a mission I need to do at 10 p.m. tonight, I've met all the requirements. My drone has the lights. It's got everything it needs. I've taken my online training after April 6th. I'm ready to go, but I need an airspace authorization. Sometime during the day, before it becomes night where I happen to live, I need to submit a Lance airspace authorization for, let's say, 3 o'clock this afternoon. That way, Lance can auto approve in near real time my authorization request, because I'm going to be below one of those facility map ceilings you mentioned. So I'm going to use that authorization through Lance in conjunction with that national authorization letter, which will allow me to fly until the end of the calendar day. So 11:59 p.m. I can fly my drone. I can do the same thing if I wanted to fly tomorrow morning. I could plan ahead, like you're mentioning, and log into Lance today and say, I'm going to fly tomorrow morning. So I'm going to submit an authorization request for tomorrow during the day. And with the combination of that national authorization letter, it will allow me to fly anytime between 12:01 a.m. tomorrow morning through 11:59 p.m. I think that's probably one of the best ways to capture what you're saying, but you're right. It's absolutely a 2-part process, although the second part you sort of just have by default. That's that letter that the FAA has issued. But the first part is the one that people need to remember. You must submit a Lance authorization during the day for the date you want to fly. Right. I think that's important.
Yeah, so I mean, you really just do have to plan ahead a little bit.
Yep.
Because you can't go back in time. If I want to fly tonight and it's already tonight, I can't really go back in time to ask for something.
Yep, I think that's a very important point. That might be the one tricky part that people need to remember is if it's 8 o'clock tonight and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need to fly at 10 o'clock tonight, you will not be able to go into Lance and go back in time. Maybe if you have a DeLorean, you can, but to go back in time during the day and submit that authorization. So you do need to plan ahead a little bit for that. So just to remind people that might be joining us, we're talking about the ops over people, the operations over people rule for drones, and we are taking questions. We're kind of going over the highlights right now. We're going to get to the questions in a little bit, but if you'd like to submit a question and have us answer it, please use the Google form. The link is in our social media chats. Submit your question and we'll do our very best to get to it here in the next 30 to 40 minutes. All right, so we've got the remote pilot certificate information updated. We've got the flying at night stuff. Let's get into what this rule is actually called, operations over people. All right. So Danielle, just from a general perspective, what are some of the highlights, the high level key issues of, hey, I want to go fly over people. What should I really understand before I even launch my drone?
You have to understand that it's a performance-based rule and that it's based on a risk and severity, like a likelihood and consequence, basically, of somebody getting injured if your drone should hit them while you're flying over them, right? So for that reason, we have designed the rule in 4 different categories. And so each category has different requirements for the drone itself and for the type of operation that you're going to be doing.
So you're saying that I can't just go fly over people now, that the operations over people rule doesn't just let me walk outside and launch the drone over a schoolyard full of kids?
Right. Yeah, exactly. So this is one of those times where you have to like read. I know, I mean, I fall in the trap of this. I like to scroll and bullet me and see the headlines. But so because there's operations over people doesn't mean you could just go out there and fly over people. You have to kind of dig into the individual requirements based on what it is that you're trying to do.
And what about that test? You mentioned for flying at night that people need to take that, either the online training or the initial knowledge test on or after April 6th to qualify for the night. Is any of that for ops over people? Do I need to take a test or online training course or anything like that to fly in accordance with the rule?
Good / tricky question. By the letter of the law, no, you don't have to take the test in order to fly in accordance with the operations over people part of the operations over people rule. However, I would say that taking the training is always a good idea. It'll reset your recurrency and you'll have the most fresh information on all topics, including flying at night. And if you wanted to combine operations over people with night, you certainly would have had to take the test for that. So I would recommend everybody take it. There's no harm. And one of the best parts about being an aviator is that there's always something new to learn. So there's no harm in taking it.
All right, excellent, thank you. And I'm going to circle back to something you mentioned here when you gave me a high level overview of the rule. Clearly, there are some conditions, some regulations or rules or whatever we want to call them about flying over people. Mm-hmm. And we talked about the different categories of drones. So let's walk through the categories. You said that there's 4 categories. So maybe let's start with the simplest or easiest, or hopefully the most common. Let's talk about category 1. What's a category 1 drone?
So category 1 is, like you said, the simplest / least lowest level of severity, and it's based on weight and an operational provision. So there are a few conditions to be flying under category 1. Number 1 is that the drone itself, including all of its parts and pieces, at takeoff must be below 0.55 pounds or 250 grams. And we're familiar with that number from registration and remote ID and a lot of other things. And it must not have any exposed rotating parts that can lacerate the skin. Now, the most important part of really all of the categories is who gets to make that determination. So for category 1, you do. If you say, yes, my drone is below this weight and there are no exposed rotating parts, or if there are, they're not going to lacerate the skin, it is now you're taking on that responsibility to say that you can comply with that, and now you may go operate over people. It's important to know, not to pile on too much, but as we go through this, we'll talk about the different kinds of operating over people. There's like transient flight over my head or like hovering over my head. If you're going to be doing any sort of sustained flight over open air assemblies or anything like that, you also must comply with remote ID. So there's a little thing in there that limits the type of operations over people until you have remote ID.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw a little clarification point out there because I think it's important when we talk about the weight for category 1 operations. We're talking about aircraft that weigh 0.55 pounds or less. And the reason I clarify that is just because there are drones out there that weigh right at that limit. And they have, let's say there's no protection from exposed rotating parts. And somebody might think, well, I can do that. I can put prop guards on it. And my prop guards will prevent somebody from being exposed to these parts, will prevent lacerations. However, that drone is right at that limit of weight. So even putting prop guards on move it above that 0.55 pound limit. And so as soon as we're out of that 0.55 pounds or less limit, we're no longer category 1. As Danielle, you pointed out, it's a weight-based requirement in addition to a few other things. So
Really
let's say we move out of category 1 operations. Now we're talking categories 2, 3, and 4. How do we break that down?
Well, I'm going to jump ahead to the most complex, just to kind of get the simplest and most complex out of the way. Category 4 is something that has an airworthiness certificate by the FAA. This is a expensive and time-consuming process that really only a manufacturer would go through to certificate a drone, kind of the same way an airplane would be certificated. So it's got certain reliability and durability requirements and all of its own provisions. So we don't currently have any of those, right? So most of what's going to happen is this category 2 and 3. Category 2 and 3, like we said, the whole rule is kind of centered around this likelihood and severity of an injury of a person. And these are two different thresholds based on the complexity of the operation itself. I feel like I said that really fast. So category 2 is a little bit more general, flying over people. It's, we're not doing any sort of filmmaking in a closed set where there's lots of complexity. So we're just out kind of in the world. And so there's a much lower threshold for injury on this. The big question, and it seems like the big confusion, is who decides what category I am? How do I know? And the answer is you don't get to decide necessarily. As an individual, you don't have to decide. We have this thing called means of compliance and declaration of compliance, which I know is the next series of questions here coming up. But the short answer is, if your drone is not listed on a declaration of compliance, it's not in a category currently. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest takeaway between, well, I like how you did that, Danielle. We talked about the easiest, and we talked about the most complex, the airworthiness certificate. So I'm going to stay focused on 1 and then 2 and 3. And I'm going to group 2 and 3 together a little bit, because the primary differences, I think that you're pointing out, is with a category 1 drone, I, as the remote pilot in command, make that determination that it's a category 1 drone. I'm the one that checks the weight. I'm the one that ensures that it doesn't have any exposed rotating parts that can hurt or injure somebody like that. That's really up to me. It's the category 2 and 3 where it gets a little bit more complex. And since you mentioned means of compliance and declaration of compliance, that's exactly where we're going to go next.
Okay.
So
all right.
When we get into that category 2 and 3, the regulation requires some performance measurements. It's not just saying you have to ensure that the exposed rotating parts can't injure somebody. We get into foot-pounds and kinetic energy and impact absorption and really sort of your technical complex things that the means of compliance and the document or the declaration of compliance get into. So we're going to keep this part, everyone watching, very, very high level. Again, if you do have questions, please submit them into our Google form. And also, we're going to give you the support center information at the end. You can get some of those highly technical questions answered by those groups of people, really smart people working on that. So we're going to talk about the means of compliance first, but relatively high view. So if I were to try to explain this to somebody that doesn't understand anything about drone flying, like, what is the means of compliance?
The means of compliance is a description of how a drone is complying with the rule, right? So like you mentioned 11 foot-pounds and math, and there's testing protocols, and there's all this testing and process that has to go in to show how we are going to meet the requirements of the rule. And that is described on the means of compliance. Typically, this is produced by the manufacturer or a standards body that says, hey, this is a way you can do it. And it's really important to note, I mean, it's a little squishy in here for the average person, but this rule is what we call a performance-based rule. There may be more than one way to comply with operations over people for category 2 or category 3. And this setup allows different ways of meeting that. And so as the future changes, as technology changes, there may be different materials or maybe different protocols to use. And that's why it's set up that way. But the short answer is the means of compliance shows how a drone is going to comply with the rule. And then you may hear the term declaration of compliance is just a list of the drones that have a means of compliance established and accepted by the FAA.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great explanation. Thanks. I think it's important to point out as well that both of those, I'm going to refer to them as documents, means of compliance and the declaration of compliance, are FAA approved documents. So when Danielle mentions that, for example, the means of compliance show how a drone can be tested or how a drone can be demonstrated to meet the requirements of the rule, that is going to be an FAA approved document. And as Danielle was absolutely correct in saying that there is going to be more than one way. We know there's going to be more than one way. We want there to be more than one way. And that's why we left it at performance-based. So the rule says you have to show the drone is capable of managing this type of impact and kinetic energy. How you show that compliance, we're leaving up to business. We're leaving up to the drone community. We're leaving up to manufacturers and standards bodies. And once we get those means of compliance approved, people then can use them to determine whether their drone is a category 2 or 3. And then those drones are placed on the declaration of compliance. So that the means of compliance is how it's going to meet the rule. The declaration of compliance is a list of drones that do meet the rule. Was that a pretty good recap, Danielle?
Yeah, I think so. And I think at the end of the day, for like 99% of the people who are listening here today, all you really need to know is that if you look at the list of declarations of compliance, which you'll find on our website, if your drone's not on there, it's not in a category yet, okay? So if you're not sure, you can go on there and take a look. There's currently nothing on there. The rule just came out. There's no, the wheels have not turned quite yet. But if you're not sure, we're getting a lot of calls into the support center about this. Like, hey, I think my drone is category 2, or hey, I think it's category 3. Go look at the list of the declarations of compliance. And if your drone is on that list, it'll tell you what category it is. And if it's not, it's not.
Yep. I think that's really good. And this is something that I should probably put out there. Don't go running to that website right away. This website is going to mature over the next year or even more so as these means of compliance become FAA approved and as drones are listed on declarations of compliance that meet those impact requirements and start becoming authorized for category 2 or 3 operations. So the ink is still wet, so to speak, on this process. And as it dries, it's going to mature through the summer and the fall. We're going to see more and more of that. So I guess what I'm saying right now is don't panic if you don't see a drone on a declaration of compliance yet. It's something that's going to work through here in the next year. For sure, it'll be quite busy, but then even into the future. So,
yeah,
all right,
well, I jumped the shark a little bit too, and I did this, but I jumped to means of compliance when we're still on the categories. And I think I left out an important part. And you may be wondering, like, why are there so many categories? What's category 2 and category 3? Why does it matter to me? And what I said was the category 2 kind of has a lower threshold of what we call kinetic energy transfer. There's a lot of maths in there, and I'm not a maths person, but I'm sure a lot of you guys are. Category 3 has a slightly higher threshold of kinetic energy transfer. And the reason that is because there's operational provisions that take that into consideration. So if you're flying, let's say, in a closed set and you've got, let's say you're making a movie and you've got actors and everybody's been briefed and they're aware that the drone is there, that's a different scenario than just flying out over your street. And that's why there are different categories to take into consideration the different risk tolerances for different scenarios.
Yeah. Thanks for that clarification, Danielle. And I think maybe the best takeaway for anyone when we're talking about this operation over people provision and the different categories and how you can maybe operate over moving vehicles now with certain limitations. As Danielle pointed out, you're going to have to do a little bit of reading. We could spend hours probably talking about the nuances between the different categories. But really, it's going to be best if you take a look at the rule. You can go to our website on faa.gov/UAS, and you can get to these information talking points, so to speak, on ops over people and even remote ID. We tried to parse that information in plain language to help everyone out because Danielle, you're right. It can get pretty nuanced. It can get pretty complex. But the takeaway here is that don't just start flying over people. There are requirements, some of them pretty significant, depending on what type of drone you have. So make sure you're familiar with the regulations on anything before you go take a drone up into our national airspace system and share it with everyone else flying. So that really wraps up, I think, our lecture portion of our live event here. So this is my favorite part coming up, where we can get into the live Q&A, right? So throughout this live event and for the next 25 minutes or so, if you have questions, please use our Google Doc. The link is in the social media chats, and send us the questions. We're going to get to them. I see a list already going right now, Danielle. So we've got some pretty good engagement from people. So I'm going to sift through this and try to get some of the questions here and see if we can pull it off in answering them. So Danielle, I'm going to throw the first question to you. So the question is, are there options for individuals that currently have their 107 certificate to be covered under these new amended regulations?
Yes, there are. And this is kind of what we started with, but we can't say this enough because this has been an area of a little bit of confusion. If you currently hold a Part 107 certificate, right, no matter when you got it, you've got the card, you can go on to FAAsafety.gov and take the new recurrent training course, which has a number. It's ALC 677.
Yes.
Yeah. And complete the training, answer a few questions. Once you have that certificate in your hand, you have now completed one of the requirements for flying at night. And you are now current for another 24 months. So yes, that is available to you. It is available to you right now.
I'm going to ask a follow-up on that, Danielle. What if I'm not current right now? So I got my Part 107 certificate when it first came out, and I just didn't fly drones that much, and so I let it lapse. So I'm well outside my 24-month or 2-year currency window. Can I go on FAAsafety.gov and take that course for free, that ALC-677, and become
Absolutely.
current?
That's one of the cool things about pilot certificates in general, is that they never expire. They just run out of currency. So I'm actually in that boat. My Part 107 certificate is currently expired. So I do need to get myself onto that, or is currently out of currency, I should say.
I was going to call you out on that.
You should have. Just call me out when I make a mistake, because everyone makes mistakes. We all learn. Anyway, so yes, I need to go onto the FAAsafety.gov website and take that recurrent training course. And when I do, it'll reset my currency for 24 more months.
Awesome. I think that's one of the coolest aspects of that online training, other than the fact that it's free, right? So you don't have to find that 150 or 160 bucks to pay the testing center to go take that test. All right. So thank you. Next question, Danielle, I'm going to answer this one just because I think you talked about it earlier, but the question is, can you elaborate on the process for Category 2 and Category 3 certifications? So I will a little bit, just with the caveat that, keep in mind, we're still working through this process, not only as a regulatory agency, but as a business and community industry, because we don't currently have any means of compliance that I've seen, and we might have just got one in the last day or two that I didn't see, but the means of compliance, that process for how a drone is going to demonstrate it can be Category 2 or 3, is still being developed in a lot of different ways. So while there may be a process out there now that I just haven't seen, there will be in the next month, I would expect, or even sooner. And those processes will describe how a drone is going to meet that qualification. And as Danielle pointed out, that process typically is going to be developed by the drone manufacturer or standards bodies. I don't plan on submitting a means of compliance to the FAA for approval. I think you're going to see those coming from manufacturers. So the process itself will be sort of manufacturer and standards body driven, and we'll see how that process sort of fleshes out here in the next month or even sooner. So more to come on that. I know it's not a great answer, but there's still a lot of things happening and moving pieces in real time with these operation over people categories, especially 2 and 3. So that is a great question, and we'll see more of that coming up. Let's see, let me find one here. Oh, Danielle, this sort of follows up to the question you just answered. How quickly will we see the recent changes to Part 107 be implemented in the actual Part 107 certification test?
Very quickly, because it's already done. As of April 6th, the content for the training and the testing has been updated to meet the requirements of the new rule. So if you're a new pilot looking to get your 107, you can go to a knowledge testing center and take that written test now, and that's the training to operate at night.
Awesome. So
we already covered ad nauseam, the online training. Yeah. Oh, I wanted to ask you a question, Kevin.
Wait, that's not how this works.
Oh, okay, fine.
Go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about the training, and I think it's appropriate because we've had a lot of questions about it. And earlier you mentioned that there's 3 courses, and 2 of which are really primarily for Part 61 pilots. I know you and I are both Part 61 pilots, but a lot of people don't know what that means. So what does that mean?
Sure. That is a great question. I sort of brushed right over that. So thanks for pointing that out. So Part 61, I'm going to say is traditional aircraft. I think I might be skewered for calling crewed or manned aircraft traditional aircraft, but nonetheless, when we're talking about Part 61 certificates, it's the pilot certificates most people think of. The airline pilots have them. The people that own airplanes at airports that fly them around. It's manned aircraft certificates. So just like Part 107 is the rule that allows us to issue a remote pilot certificate, Part 61 is the rule that allows us to issue manned or crewed aircraft certificates. So those courses that Danielle is referencing, and there are 2 of them, they'll clearly state in the introductory text that the course is for Part 61 pilots only. So if you're jumping onto a test or an online training course and it says for Part 61 pilots only, and you're not a Part 61 pilot that's also current under Part 61, that's the wrong test. I think maybe we'll just focus on the number. Make sure you're taking ALC-677, and then you'll be on the right test. So, all right, awesome. Thanks, Danielle. Appreciate that question. I'm going to throw one back at you now.
Okay.
And this goes back to what you sort of talked about briefly in Ops Over People. The question is, what really is the difference between occasionally passing over a group of people or transiting versus sustained flight? Because that term, sustained flight, definitely appears in our rule. So what is the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of like the reasonable person standard. Sustained flight would be, sustained means like for a period of time. But if you think about, if you're going to fly over, let's say, a marathon, and you're going to fly over a runner and just go along the course of the marathon, you're staying over the marathon. Or if you're maneuvering or circling over a stadium or something like that, you're trying to, be like the blimp that's going over the stadium, over the whole game. Like that would be sustained flight. Something that would not count as sustained flight is you're just flying over and you pass over a road and there's people standing on the sidewalk. You've just flown over their heads, but you just transited right over them. So I think, anything more than that, if you're going to be right over people's heads for a while, would be considered sustained flight.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And it's to be fair, Danielle, that was sort of a setup question because it is a difficult answer for people in the FAA to provide a clear-cut, black and white, 1 and 0 answer to that question because there are so many variables. And this is why the FAA does not purposely define certain things. And if you've been flying under 107 for quite a while, you probably know that we don't define sparsely populated. So there's things that we don't define. Open air assemblies of people. We give some examples in the preamble to the rule, but we don't really get into the definition. Sustained flight, we give some examples, but we don't really say this is sustained flight because we're allowing for the variables. We're allowing for that sort of performance-based rulemaking to apply to the operation. Otherwise, as soon as the FAA puts out a hard boxed definition, now you're boxed into that.
Yeah, you don't want that.
And there's no way out. So even though it can be a little, go ahead.
Sorry, I interrupted you, but this is how I know that the drone pilots are pilots. You know what I mean? Like we're all pilots. Pilots love to sit around the crew room and like pick apart all these rules and come up with these like corner cases and like really think through all the nuance of it. And that's fun to do and that's good. And you should be thinking through these things. But at the end of the day, I mean, these things are meant to provide you the most flexibility, like you said. There's a reasonable person standard in there that I think we can all get close to each other on. And one one of the most important parts of all of this is that you have to have a built-in sense of responsibility and accountability for what you're doing out there. Otherwise, you end up, like you said, with really prescriptive rules that box you in, and trust me, you don't want that, because that's not going to provide you the flexibility that you want, and it will stifle kind of the innovation and the fun that we're having out there.
Yep, absolutely right. I agree 100% with you, Danielle. A next question coming in. I'm going to take this one because I think I was the one that mentioned it here. So the question is, will current standard prop guards meet the new operation over people's requirement for no exposed rotating parts, or will props now have to be fully enclosed top and bottom, for example, a cage? Really good question, and it steers us right back into performance-based rulemaking. So will prop guards meet the requirement? The answer is it depends. If you're a Category 1 drone, that's a self-certification process. So you look at your drone, you decided to put prop guards on that drone. Let's say it still weighs below the maximum allotted weight. Will those prop guards prevent lacerations? If you look at it and say, yes, they will, then you're in compliance with the rule, because that's a self-certification event. For Categories 2 and 3, it's a little bit different, right? Because now we get into means of compliance, and there's going to be a process that has to be used to make a determination if that drone can be a Category 2 or 3. So there's no clear-cut answer to will prop guards meet the rule definition, because it's really going to be up to the manufacturers, the drone pilots, to say, I've put this device fully enclosed or semi-enclosed on there to prevent lacerations. This meets the rule either through a means of compliance or through certification under Category 1, or my own sort of certification under Category 1, then yes, prop guards would meet that rule. But that's going to be up to the community to decide. It's going to be up to industry to work through that with the standards bodies for Category 2 and 3. So great question. I know we're all looking for an easy answer. We want the FAA to say, yes, just throw prop guards on your drone and you're good. We can't do that, because we have to know that those prop guards are going to do what they're supposed to do. And there are a lot of different types out there. So really do your research before you fly over people. Go into the rule, take a look at it, and then decide whether or not prop guards, do they have to be fully enclosed or not. That's going to be a decision that you'll need to make. So that is a great question. All right, Danielle, I'm going to go back to sort of a softball question. We've had some tough ones. So this one, although it's a very basic question, I think it's really important, especially for people that might be tuning in that are not Part 107 remote pilots. So the question is, how can I get a Part 107 certificate?
Good question. To get your Part 107 certificate, you must take a knowledge test at a approved testing center. You can find a list of those testing centers on our website. The test that is currently available, like we've said, as of April 6th, does cover the new material. So if you take the test now and you pass it and you get your remote pilot certificate, you will be up to date with all of Parts 107 to operate that way. Technically speaking, or physically, or like literally, how do we do this? You apply for the test, you go take the test, and then you have to go on to our IACRA website, another acronym. I have no idea what it stands for. IACRA, all this stuff, by the way, you can get by going to FAA.gov/UAS. It'll give you all the steps in a better order than I'm giving it to you, but you have to take another step after you take the test and apply for the certificate. And the application is simply, you put in your details, and it verifies that you took the test and that you passed it, et cetera, and they'll mail you a certificate. I had some other point. It's flown right out of my head. So we can move on.
That's okay. I'll pile onto that too. And you can go to our website, again, FAA.gov/UAS, and you can find the information there too on how to become a Part 107 remote pilot. All the steps are listed. There's links that can get you to what Danielle was talking about, the testing centers, to find one closest to you. But there is another way, and that's a very special way for Part 61. Now we're going to go back to that for a minute. Part 61 pilots who are current, they can go to the FAAsafety.gov website and take one of those courses that are designed for them, and they can go look at that. And we won't go too far down the rabbit hole on that, but there is another option there. So Danielle, I'm going to ask a follow-up though. So let's say I took my Part 107 initial aeronautical knowledge test and I passed it because I studied, but I passed it on April 4th. Can I fly at night tomorrow?
Not simply with that. So there's just, just by nature of the way time goes on, if you took your initial test on April 4th and you passed it and you have your certificate, you do have to go back in to FAAsafety.gov and take that recurrent course now, prior to flying at night. And the reason is that the content did change. The content on the written test, as well as the recurrent training, did change to include the new regulations. And so you would need to take that recurrent, even though you just took the test 2 days ago. And I do have to make one point here. This is like sort of a language point, because we've had a lot of this come into the support center where people thought that they took the initial and had a remote pilot certificate when they in fact did not. And this is just sort of nomenclature, I guess, but this is why people are getting confused. When you go to FAAsafety.gov, there, like you said, there are 3 courses there. And one of them is called initial. That initial course is for what Kevin, who's above me here, was just describing. That initial training is only for people who have a traditional, as Kevin said, manned pilot certificate.
You're really going to get me in trouble for that.
61. It is not the initial for a brand new remote pilot. If you are not currently a manned pilot, you're coming from scratch, you're brand new to the game, you have to go to the testing center and take a written exam there.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. So here's follow-up part 2 question, but I think it's very poignant here. Can I really take an online course for free to get current?
Yes, I feel like now, right. Yes, we can clap. We can small round of applause for the FAA. There is a free online recurrent training course, FAAsafety.gov. Go take it. It is free. It is online. You don't have to go anywhere.
It's not a dream.
You don't have to pay anything. You could take it from your couch. You probably, still want to pay attention. But again, because it is free, I would recommend that no matter what your lot in life right now, you should take it. There's some really good information in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're gonna move off the subject here of tests and training courses. But I do want to point out that if you are going to go take that initial aeronautical knowledge test, the first step in the process to get your remote pilot certificate, as Danielle pointed out, the new rules, the portions are on that test. And it's not just operating over people, operating at night over moving vehicles. It's also remote ID. Remote ID information is also included on those tests. So before you walk in, I don't want anybody to be surprised and say, well, I didn't know remote ID was going to be on here. Take a look at our advisory circular on Part 107. It is a great document, a plain language document that has all the information you would need to learn about the new rule requirements. I wouldn't say all the information you need to pass the test, but certainly the remote ID information, the operating over people, operating at night information is in that advisory circular. And the number you're looking for, because all of our advisory circulars are numbered, is 107-2A. A as in Apple or Alpha, if you're a pilot background, 107-2A as in Alpha. Take a look at that advisory circular before you go in and take any test. All right, so the next question coming in, Danielle, I'm going to try to field this one, and you're going to back me up when I go sideways on it. But the question is, the remote ID rule, which we just sort of talked about, and the operations over people rules became effective on the same day. Are they dependent on one another? So let me see what I can do here with this question, because it is a great question. Kind of. Is that the perfect government answer ever? Kind of. So when I say that is, let's break this down here a little bit, so it's sort of simple to understand. Remote ID is a standalone rule. It's not dependent upon Part 107. Part 107 is a standalone rule. It's not per se dependent upon remote ID. However, when we're talking about operations over people, and Danielle, you mentioned this when we talked about categories 1 and 2 with sustained flights over open air assembly of people, though that rule in Part 107 does require, in certain circumstances, when you're operating over people, you to broadcast remote ID. I think the wording it uses is you must operate or broadcast, use remote ID in accordance with Part 89. Part 89 is the technical term for the remote ID rule. So they both came effective on the same day. They're really independent of each other, but there are some instances where under Part 107, it references you have to fly in compliance with Part 89. Now, Part 89, remote ID, although it became effective this month, compliance is not going to be mandatory for a while, years. And I think, Danielle, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking September of 2022. Is that the right date?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I put up a 2 for 2 years. Operational compliance is September 2023.
2023. Thank you. Thank you.
Manufacturers have a compliance date in 2022. And then there's some other stuff we're not going to go into right now.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So September 2023, thank you for saving me on that one, is when that rule will be required in compliance from drone operators. So there's a lot of time built in for a lot of different reasons on remote ID. And since this isn't really a remote ID live event, we're not going to go into it, but I did want to answer that question. And so I think it's pretty important. So let me see. Let me find another one here. They're scrolling. These are great questions, everyone. And again, if you're joining us, we have just a few more minutes that we can take some live questions. Please submit them using our Google form here as we talk more about the new provisions for ops over people. Some of these are questions we've answered, so I apologize as I'm scrolling through this here. Oh, let's talk a little bit about Lance. So Danielle, I'm going to ask you this question here. Where can I find a list of FAA approved service suppliers?
You can find a list of FAA approved service suppliers at our website, faa.gov/UAS. And through there on the airspace page there, you'll find a list of service suppliers, which are the people, I don't know if you know what they are. Kevin, do you know what they are?
Well, I know what they are, but I think I was going to ask you the question, what is a UAS service supplier?
Wonderful question. So we talked about LANCE, the acronym. I always say the acronym because I always mess it up. It is the Low Altitude Airspace Notification Capability. So it's a way for you to get a near real-time airspace authorization, but that is not done directly through the FAA. So we have these FAA approved service suppliers, which are third parties that develop applications that you can use to get that authorization. So you can go into their app, and they usually provide some other services and apply for an airspace authorization that way. And again, if you're not sure who they are or where to find one, on our website, faa.gov/UAS, you can find that.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, when we talk about the service suppliers, that people don't go into either the Android or the iOS Apple store and look for the Lance app. There's no such thing called the Lance, spelled LAANC app. We use service suppliers to manage that. Lance is a data exchange system, technically speaking. So what happens is an authorized service supplier has their own app. And there's plenty out there. Danielle pointed out our website. You can find a listing of them. You can download that app and use it. When you submit a request through that app, the Lance data exchange system communicates your request to the FAA. So what you get back is an actual FAA authorization. It's not an authorization that our service suppliers create or authorize. The Lance system just communicates with the FAA. So you are getting an FAA airspace authorization when you use our service suppliers through Lance. And Danielle, I know we talked about nighttime authorization through Lance, but maybe it'd be good just to talk a little bit more about that in just some general terms again, because the question is, can I request a nighttime authorization through Lance? And I think the answer is you can't do it yet, but we do have that workaround.
Well, you can and you can. I think, you can, but not the same way you would for a daytime authorization. So I think my advice would be plan ahead. So the way it's working is there's a couple conditions. One is you have to have a daytime airspace authorization for the exact same day. So today is April 27th. If I'm going to fly at 11 p.m. tonight, I can right now, it's during the day, go into Lance, apply for an authorization for right now, and I can layer on that national authorization that extends the time efficacy of my authorization all the way until 11:59 tonight. And then if I want to fly at 2 p.m. tonight, which is technically tomorrow, April 28th, I can ask for one for tomorrow at, let's say, 10 a.m. And in that case, I can kind of go back in time and apply that to 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., or I can move it forward to 11 p.m. tomorrow night. It just has to be within the same calendar day. It's a little wacky. It just is what it is. So Lance is usable for right now. It's just not exactly in real time. And the other thing to know, I think that's important, is that you are, for now, until the fall, I think is when we're estimating that Lance will be fully operational for night, for now limited to the facility map altitudes. So I know during the day you're used to being able to apply for further coordination, which means if you're in a 200-foot box, you can ask for a 300-foot authorization, and the local air traffic manager will take a look at that and say yes or no. For Lance, is only, or excuse me, for nighttime is only within those facility map altitudes.
Yeah,
that's yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's correct. It is one of the limitations that we're seeing with Lance right now, just in the interim, because of we're trying to get the software updated and contracts updated. And there's a lot of work required, not even including the actual schedule that Lance is authorized to be updated on. But we're doing some of these workarounds, but because they're workarounds right now, and we're doing this so that people can go fly at night, there are some limitations, and in staying below the facility maps with Lance is one. Although you can use Drone Zone to submit a request for further coordination, just keep in mind you can take up to 90 days to process through that. So there's a couple questions here that I'm going to get to, maybe just one, but we're getting short on time, so perhaps it's just going to be one. And I get to do the last one here, Danielle, because I put you on the spot too many times. I feel kind of bad. The question is fairly easy for me to answer. It is, do you have to have an authorization to fly at night, even if you're outside of controlled airspace? The answer to that is no. Authorizations through Lance or Drone Zone are required only when you're operating in areas that 107. I think it's 41 specifies, and that's class Bravo, Charlie, Delta, or Surface Echo airspace designated for an airport. And that's a mouthful, I know. But if you're outside of controlled airspace, generally speaking, you do not need an airspace authorization, because you'll be flying in Class G airspace and you can operate according to rules. So we're right up against the end time here. We got a couple minutes left, and I just wanted to go through some closing remarks, if I can still talk here. And first of all, thank everyone for attending. I love the questions you guys were sending in. I'm so very fortunate to be joined by Danielle Corbett for this live event. She's brilliantly smart when it comes to drones, and this has been a very fun event for us to do. Just a reminder, the live stream recording that we're doing here will be available almost immediately on YouTube following our event. And as promised, here's some information on how you can reach out to the UAS Support Center and send your questions that you may not have gotten answered to them. It's a great group of people that can help you out. Their email address is uashelp@faa.gov, or you can pick up a telephone and call them at 1-844-FLY-MY-UA. So please utilize that support center. They're really good people and can help you out and at least get you in touch with the right person, maybe if they don't have the answer. And finally, my request is spread the word about this program on social media. We have our Drone Zone accounts, which we've set up to be dedicated specifically to share drone news and drone information. So please share those accounts. We have a Drone Zone Twitter and we have a Drone Zone Facebook account, because that's where we're going to provide a lot of updates for what's happening. And there is a lot happening over the next 9 months, not only with Part 107, but recreational flyers, Lance, all sorts of stuff coming up, remote ID, everything. So please follow us on social media, share that news with everyone. And we really appreciate you joining us for the hour today. So Danielle, I'm going to speak for you on behalf of Danielle and myself. It has been a pleasure to reach out to you through this digital platform. I hope we can do it again soon. I wish everyone a great week. Have a wonderful weekend and fly safe.